Hi, this is Jeremy with Math Bootcamps, and in this video I'm going to show you how to find z-intervals and t-intervals on the TI-84 calculator. This will also work on the TI-83. So what I'm doing is I'm using examples straight from the Math Bootcamps website, straight from this article, the link's in the video description. And so what we're going to do is look at two examples, one where I use a z-interval and one where I need to use a t-interval. They're really similar on the calculator. So in this example, I'm told somebody wants to estimate the amount of time college students spend browsing the internet each day. And so we have some sample data. And then I notice a very important sentence. It says, if it's believed that the population standard deviation is 14 minutes, ... So we're trying to estimate an average, and we're told to assume we know the population standard deviation. That's when you're going to use a z-interval. So to use a z-interval, what I do is I press stat, and I go to tests, and it's actually number 7. So I can either type the number 7 or highlight it and press enter. I went ahead and typed it. Now you have two choices. You can use data. If you highlight data, that means you need to have a list of numbers in your stat list. We don't have that. We actually have calculated statistics. So I highlight stats and press enter. And the first thing it asks for is sigma. That's a sign that a good reminder that you need to know the population standard deviation, because that's what that represents. So this is 14. And then x bars are sample mean. It says in a sample of 32, the average time was 67, so that's 67. And so the sample size is 32. Finally, the C level, that is the confidence level, and this is 0.95. And now all I got to do is calculate. And so there's my confidence interval. There's multiple correct ways you could write this, but this is probably the most common way that you would see to write a confidence interval. Okay, so there's a Z interval. What about a T interval? So I'm going to go ahead and clear out my screen. And we'll take a look at this example. It says for a stats project, a student samples 37 high school teachers in their community and records how many years they've worked in education. In her sample, the average was 14.2 with a standard deviation of 6.8. The first thing I notice in that sentence is that the standard deviation came from the sample. So that's not a sigma, that's an S. Use this information to estimate the mean ... Okay, so that's a confidence interval. That's what confidence intervals do. They estimate an unknown population value. And we don't have the population standard deviation this time. So that means I need to use a t-interval here. Just like before, I'm going to press stat, go to test, and then what I want actually is number 8 t-interval. I'll show it to you, although you could just type the number 8 from right here. There's my t-interval. And just like before, I can highlight either data or stats. And if you have calculated statistics, you got to highlight stats and press enter. And it's already set up. It has some of the information from when we did the z-interval. And so the mean is 14.2, standard deviation 6.8. And then the sample size was 37. Notice here it asks for S, the sample standard deviation, not sigma this time. And then we want a 99% confidence interval, so I'm going to press 0.99 for confidence level. Calculate. Notice it takes a second. That's just because it's using the t distribution. And we have our t interval here. Now, I'll highly recommend that once you know how to calculate these, that you read carefully about how to correctly interpret them, because the meaning behind these is much more important than the calculation.